The desert wind carried whispers of what happened that night, but command buried the footage deeper than any classified file. They called it impossible. A single Apache helicopter, engines failing, hydraulics bleeding against 18 armored vehicles moving through the Caldon Pass. The after-action report read like fiction. One pilot, one gunner, one impossible victory that changed everything. Lieutenant Colonel Kira, Blackbird, Thorne wasn't supposed to be there. Her psychological evaluation 3 months earlier had been damning. Exhibits signs of combat stress reaction. Recommend immediate grounding pending full psychiatric review. The words still burned in her memory as she sat in the briefing room, watching younger pilots receive missions she'd once led. 23 years of service, 2 silver stars, and countless lives saved meant nothing against a single doctor's signature. But on October 15, 2019, when Major Torres collapsed during pre-flight, fate intervened. The convoy intelligence was fresh, Iranian-backed militants transporting advanced surface-to-air missiles through the pass. Window of opportunity, 90 minutes before they reached the border. No backup available. The decision came down to one question: send a grounded pilot or watch those missiles disappear into hostile territory. "Blackbird, you're up," Colonel Martinez had said, his voice heavy with reluctance. "But this is reconnaissance only. No engagement without explicit authorization." Kira's hands trembled as she pulled on her flight suit for the first time in 3 months. The fabric felt foreign against her skin, yet familiar as breathing. Her gunner, Sergeant First Class Danny Scope Reeves, had volunteered despite knowing her history. Most wouldn't fly with a pilot stamped unfit for combat. The Apache's pre-flight checks revealed what maintenance had been hiding: hydraulic leaks, engine temperature spikes, navigation system glitches. Any sane pilot would have aborted. But sanity was a luxury they couldn't afford. The missiles were moving. "Tower, this is Blackbird 1, requesting clearance for immediate departure." "Blackbird 1, be advised, weather conditions deteriorating. Recommend delay until." "Negative, Tower, mission critical, we're going now." The rotors spun up with a mechanical scream that echoed across the base. In the distance, storm clouds gathered like an omen. Kira's medical file painted her as broken, a veteran whose mind had finally cracked under the weight of war. But as they lifted off into the dying light, something else stirred in her chest, not the hollow ache of trauma, but the fierce burn of purpose. The convoy was 47 miles southeast, threading through mountain passes that had swallowed entire armies. Intelligence suggested 18 vehicles, heavy escort, sophisticated air defense systems. For a fully operational Apache crew, it would be challenging. For a grounded pilot in a failing aircraft, it was suicide. "Scope, you still with me back there?" Kira asked as they banked toward the mountains. "Always, Blackbird, always." Neither of them knew they were flying toward legend. The first visual contact came at 21:47 hours, 32 minutes into the flight. The convoy stretched across the valley floor like a mechanical serpent, headlights cutting through the darkness. 18 vehicles, just as intelligence had predicted. But intelligence had been wrong about everything else. "Holy shit," Scope whispered into his mic. "Blackbird, those aren't just transport trucks. I'm seeing T-72 tanks, BMP infantry fighting vehicles, and what looks like a Panzer S-1 anti-aircraft system." Kira's blood turned to ice. They weren't looking at a simple weapons transport. This was a fully equipped mechanized unit, the kind that ate helicopters for breakfast. "Tower, this is Blackbird 1. Convoy composition is not as briefed, requesting immediate backup and authorization to engage." Static filled the radio for 10 seconds before Colonel Martinez's voice crackled through. "Blackbird 1, negative on backup. Closest support is 40 minutes out. You are authorized to observe and report only. Do not engage. I repeat, do not engage." Kira watched the convoy through her night vision, counting muzzle flashes as they test-fired their weapons. The Panzer system's radar dish swept methodically across the sky. They knew someone was watching. "Blackbird, my targeting system just lit up," Scope reported. "They've got a lock on us." The Apache shuddered as a hydraulic line burst, spraying fluid across the cockpit glass. Warning lights cascaded across the instrument panel like falling stars. Engine temperature climbed toward the red zone. "We need to get out of here," Scope urged. "This bird's not going to hold together much longer." But Kira was thinking about the intelligence briefing. Those missiles weren't just weapons, they were game changers. Advanced Russian-made systems that could down passenger jets, military transports, even stealth aircraft. In the wrong hands, they would shift the balance of power across the entire region. "Scope, how many Hellfire missiles do we have left?" 16, but Blackbird were not authorized to. "How many?" 16, he repeated reluctantly. The convoy began to spread out, vehicles taking defensive positions. They'd spotted the Apache and were preparing for engagement. In minutes, they'd be in the mountains where the terrain would provide cover from air attack. "Tower, this is Blackbird 1. Convoy is taking defensive positions. If they reach the pass, we lose them." "Blackbird 1, maintain distance. Support is en route." 40 minutes, Tower. They'll be gone in 10. Kira thought about her psychological evaluation, about the doctor who declared her unfit for combat. She thought about the nightmares that had plagued her for months, the faces of the pilots she'd lost, the weight of command that had finally broken her. Then she thought about those missiles reaching terrorist cells, about passenger jets falling from the sky, about the innocent lives that would be lost if she followed orders. "Scope, are you ready?" "Ready for what?" "To make some history." The Apache dove toward the convoy like a mechanical hawk, its engines screaming protest as Kira pushed beyond the aircraft's limits. The altimeter spun wildly as they descended, the ground rushing up to meet them with terrifying speed. The first engagement came at 21:53 hours when the Pantsir system acquired a solid lock. Kira felt the familiar weight of missile warning alarms, a sound that had haunted her dreams for months. But now, in the moment of truth, her hands were steady. "Blackbird, they're painting us with targeting radar," Scope called out. "Multiple systems acquiring." "I see them." Kira's voice was calm, professional. The woman who'd been declared unfit for combat had disappeared, replaced by the pilot who'd earned her call sign through 23 years of precision flying. The first surface-to-air missile launched with a brilliant flash, its exhaust trail cutting through the darkness like a sword. Kira threw the Apache into a spiral dive, chaff and flares erupting from the aircraft's defensive systems. The missile screamed past, missing by less than 50 meters. "Jesus Christ," Scope breathed. "That was too close." "It's about to get closer." Kira leveled the helicopter and lined up on the lead tank. "Scope, target the T-72 at bearing 270. Hellfire ready." "Blackbird, we don't have authorization." "I'm authorizing it, fire." The Hellfire missile streaked across the valley, its warhead detonating against the tank's turret with devastating effect. The explosion lit up the night sky, and for a moment, the entire convoy stopped moving. "Direct hit," Scope reported. "Tank is destroyed." But the victory was short-lived. The convoy erupted into action, every vehicle turning their weapons toward the Apache. Tracer rounds filled the air like deadly fireworks, and another surface-to-air missile launched from the Pantsir system. "Evasive maneuvers," Kira shouted, throwing the helicopter into a violent turn. The second missile exploded close enough to rattle the aircraft's frame, and warning lights began flashing across the instrument panel. "Hydraulic pressure dropping," Scope called out. "We're losing flight controls." "Not yet, we're not." Kira's hands flew across the controls, compensating for the failing systems through pure skill and instinct. The Apache might have been dying, but it wasn't dead yet. The next 5 minutes would define everything. The second tank fell to a perfect shot through its rear deck, the Hellfire missile finding the vulnerable spot where armor was thinnest. Kira had studied Soviet tank design for years, memorizing every weakness, every blind spot. Now that knowledge paid dividends in fire and steel. "That's two down," Scope reported, his voice gaining confidence. "But we've got problems. The Panzer is repositioning for another shot." The anti-aircraft system moved with mechanical precision, its radar dish sweeping the sky while twin missile launchers tracked their movement. Kira knew they had perhaps 30 seconds before the next launch. "Scope, can you get a lock on the Panzer?" "Negative. Too much interference from the terrain." The Apache lurched suddenly as another hydraulic line failed. The helicopter wanted to fall from the sky, but Kira fought it with everything she had. Her arms burned with effort as she wrestled the controls, keeping them airborne through sheer determination. "Blackbird, we need to get out of here," Scope urged. "This bird's not going to hold together much longer." "5 more minutes," Kira replied through gritted teeth. "Give me 5 more minutes." The convoy had spread across the valley floor, vehicles taking cover behind rocks and abandoned buildings. But they were still moving toward the pass, still trying to escape with their deadly cargo. "Tower, this is Blackbird 1. Convoy is dispersing. Require immediate support." "Blackbird 1, support is still 30 minutes out. Break off engagement and return to base." "Negative, Tower, cannot comply." Colonel Martinez's voice came through the radio, sharp with authority. "Lieutenant Colonel Thorne, this is a direct order. Return to base immediately." Kira switched off the radio. "Scope, did you hear that?" "Hear what?" her gunner replied with a slight smile in his voice. "Exactly." Kira banked the Apache toward the next target, a BMP infantry fighting vehicle loaded with soldiers. "Let's finish this." The Hellfire missile struck the BMP just as it was deploying its troops. The explosion sent bodies flying through the air, and for a moment, Kira felt the familiar weight of taking lives. But then she thought about the passenger jets that would never fall, the families that would never grieve, and the weight lifted. 3 down, Scope called out, 13 to go. But the convoy was learning, adapting. The remaining vehicles had spread out across a wider area, making targeting more difficult. Worse, they were coordinating their fire, creating overlapping fields of destruction that made low-level attack runs nearly impossible. "Blackbird, they're getting smart," Scope observed. "This isn't going to be easy." "Easy's never been in my vocabulary," Kira replied, diving toward the next target. The Apache screamed through the valley at impossible speed, its damaged engines howling in protest. Warning lights flashed like a Christmas tree, and the smell of burning hydraulic fluid filled the cockpit. But Kira flew on, her hands steady, her mind focused on the mission. The fourth target was a supply truck loaded with ammunition. The Hellfire missile turned it into a pillar of fire that reached toward the stars. Secondary explosions rippled through the convoy as burning debris fell like rain. "That's 4, Scope reported. But we've got a problem. The Panzer is locking onto us again." The surface-to-air missile launched with a brilliant flash, its exhaust trail cutting through the smoke-filled air. Kira threw the Apache into a spiral climb, pushing the dying aircraft beyond its limits. The missile screamed past, missing by inches. "Too close," Scope muttered. "Way too close." "Not close enough," Kira replied, already lining up the next target. "Let's keep dancing." The fifth engagement came at 22:01 hours when Kira spotted the prize, a heavy transport truck with reinforced armor and extra security. Through her night vision, she could see the distinctive outline of missile crates in the cargo bay. "Scope, target the transport at bearing 345. That's our primary objective." "Roger that, Hellfire ready." The missile streaked across the valley, its warhead detonating against the truck's side armor. But the explosion wasn't enough. The transport lurched but kept moving, its cargo intact. "Damn it," Scope cursed, Armor's too thick. Then we'll have to get creative. Kira brought the Apache around in a wide circle, studying the terrain. The transport was moving through a narrow canyon, its route predictable. Can you target the canyon wall above the truck? You want to start an avalanche. I want to stop those missiles. Scope adjusted his targeting system, locking onto the rocky outcropping that hung over the canyon like a stone sword. The Hellfire missile struck the cliff face with perfect precision, sending thousands of tons of rock cascading down onto the transport below. The truck disappeared under the avalanche, its cargo buried under tons of stone and debris. The missiles that had threatened to change the balance of power in the region were now part of the mountain itself. Primary objective complete, Scope reported. Missiles are neutralized. But the convoy wasn't finished. The remaining vehicles had regrouped and were moving with renewed purpose. They'd lost their primary cargo, but they still had enough firepower to level a small city. Blackbird, multiple targets still active, Scope called out. What's the plan? Kira looked at the instrument panel, counting warning lights like constellation stars. The Apache was dying around them, its systems failing one by one. But they weren't dead yet. We finish what we started, she said, diving toward the next target. Every last one of them. The sixth target died in a ball of fire as the Hellfire missile found its mark. The seventh fell to a perfect shot through its engine block. The eighth and ninth went down in quick succession, their burning hulks lighting up the valley like beacons. That's 9 down, Scope reported, 7 to go. But the Apache was reaching its limits. The main rotor was developing a dangerous vibration, and the engine temperature gauges were buried in the red zone. Smoke began to seep into the cockpit, carrying the acrid smell of burning electronics. Blackbird, we're losing power, Scope warned. We need to set down. Not yet. Kira's voice was steady despite the chaos around them. Not until we're finished. The 10th target was another BMP, its crew frantically trying to bring their weapons to bear on the Apache. But Kira was faster, her Hellfire missile striking the vehicle before it could fire a single shot. 10 down, Scope called out. But we've got a problem. The Panzer is moving again. The anti-aircraft system had relocated to a better position, its radar dish sweeping the sky with renewed intensity. Kira knew they had perhaps 20 seconds before the next missile launch. Scope, can you get a lock on the Panzer now? Affirmative, but it's going to be a difficult shot. Difficult's what we do best. The Hellfire missile streaked across the valley, its warhead detonating against the Panzer's radar dish. The explosion sent sparks flying in all directions, and the system went dark. Direct hit, Scope reported. Anti-aircraft system is down. With the Panzer neutralized, the Apache was free to operate at lower altitudes. Kira dove toward the remaining targets, her hands steady despite the aircraft's increasing instability. The 11th target was a fuel truck, its explosion sending a mushroom cloud of fire into the night sky. The 12th was a command vehicle, its destruction severing the convoy's communication links. 12 down, Scope reported, 6 to go. But the Apache was running out of time. The main rotor was shaking violently, and the engine was beginning to seize. Warning alarms filled the cockpit with their electronic screams. Blackbird, we need to land, Scope urged. This bird's not going to hold together much longer. Just a little longer, Kira replied, her voice strained with effort. We're almost done. The 13th target fell to a perfect shot through its ammunition storage. The secondary explosion was so powerful it shattered windows in the distant mountains. The 14th and 15th went down in quick succession, their burning hulks adding to the growing graveyard in the valley. That's 15 down, Scope reported, 3 to go. The remaining vehicles were the toughest, a pair of T-72 tanks and a final BMP. They'd taken defensive positions and were coordinating their fire, creating a deadly crossfire that made approach nearly impossible. Scope, what's our ammunition status? One Hellfire left, and maybe 30 rounds of 30. Then we'd better make them count. Kira studied the enemy positions, looking for weaknesses. The tanks were hull down behind earthworks, their turrets tracking the Apache's movement. The BMP was positioned to provide covering fire, its cannon already swiveling toward them. Blackbird, they're locked onto us, Scope warned. If we go in there, we're not coming out. Then we'd better go in fast. The Apache dove toward the enemy positions at maximum speed, its engines screaming in protest. The tanks opened fire immediately, their muzzle flashes lighting up the night like lightning strikes. But Kira was already moving, her aircraft dancing between the shell bursts with impossible grace. The final Hellfire missile struck the first tank just as it was loading another shell. The explosion was magnificent, the turret flying through the air like a discus. But the second tank was already firing, its shell passing so close to the Apache that the shockwave rattled the aircraft's frame. We're out of Hellfires, Scope reported, switching to cannon. The 30 rounds stitched across the second tank's hull, searching for weak points. Kira held the Apache steady despite the enemy fire, giving her gunner the stable platform he needed. Come on, Scope muttered, his fingers steady on the trigger. Come on. The armor-piercing rounds found their mark, penetrating the tank's side armor and detonating inside the crew compartment. The explosion was smaller than the Hellfires, but just as deadly. The tank lurched to a halt, smoke pouring from its hatches. That's 17 down, Scope reported. 1 to go. But the Apache was finished. The main rotor was shaking so violently that Kira could barely hold the controls. The engine temperature gauges were off the scale, and smoke was pouring into the cockpit. Blackbird, we need to land now, Scope urged. This bird's done. Not yet, Kira replied, her voice tight with concentration. One more. The final BMP was moving toward the pass, its crew knowing they were the last survivors. If they escaped, they would carry word of the attack back to their commanders. The mission would be compromised, and future operations would be endangered. Scope, can you get a lock on the BMP? Negative, too much smoke and debris. Then we'll have to do this the hard way. Kira brought the Apache down to minimum altitude, flying between the burning hulks of the destroyed vehicles. The BMP's gunner saw them coming and opened fire, his cannon rounds passing inches from the helicopter's fuselage. Blackbird, he's got us bracketed, Scope warned. We need to break off. Not happening. The Apache's cannon spat fire, its rounds walking across the BMP's hull, but the armor was too thick, and the rounds bounced off harmlessly. The enemy vehicle's return fire was getting closer with each shot. Scope, target the tracks, Kira ordered. If we can't kill it, we'll stop it. The 30 rounds found their mark, chewing through the BMP's track system. The vehicle lurched to a halt, its crew frantically trying to repair the damage. He stopped, Scope reported, but he still got his main gun. Not for long. Kira brought the Apache around in a wide circle, using the smoke and debris as cover. The BMP's gunner was tracking their movement, but the visibility was poor and his shots were going wide. Scope, can you see the commander's hatch? Affirmative, but it's a small target. Small's what we specialize in. The 30 rounds struck the BMP's commander's hatch with surgical precision, jamming the turret's rotation mechanism. The vehicle was now helpless, its crew trapped inside their steel tomb. That's 18 down, Scope reported. Mission complete. But the Apache was beyond saving. The main rotor was disintegrating, and the engine was beginning to seize. Warning alarms filled the cockpit with their electronic screams. Blackbird, we need to auto-rotate, Scope urged. Right now. Roger that. Kira pulled the collective down and entered auto-rotation, using the helicopter's falling motion to keep the rotors turning. The Apache dropped like a stone, its nose pitched forward as it descended toward the valley floor. "Find me a flat spot," Kira called out, her hands flying across the controls. "Anything that looks remotely landable." There, Scope pointed to a small clearing between two burning vehicles. "It's tight, but it might work." The Apache touched down hard, its landing gear buckling under the impact. The aircraft bounced once, then settled onto the desert floor with a grinding screech of twisted metal. For a moment, silence filled the cockpit. Then Scope began to laugh. "Holy shit, Blackbird, we did it. We actually did it." Kira sat back in her seat, her hands shaking with exhaustion and adrenaline. Through the smoke and debris, she could see the burning remains of the entire convoy spread across the valley floor. 18 vehicles destroyed. The missiles neutralized. The mission complete. "Tower, this is Blackbird 1, she said into her radio. "Mission accomplished. Convoy is destroyed. Repeat, convoy is destroyed." The response came immediately. "Blackbird 1, say again. Did you say convoy is destroyed?" "Affirmative, Tower. All 18 vehicles neutralized. Missiles are buried under about 1,000 tons of rock. They're not going anywhere." Silence filled the radio for a long moment. Then Colonel Martinez's voice came through, filled with disbelief. "Blackbird 1, confirm your status." "We're alive, sir. Aircraft is totaled, but we're alive." "How the hell did you? Never mind. We'll debrief later. Search and rescue is en route. ETA 20 minutes. Kira looked at the instrument panel, now dark except for a few flickering lights. The Apache that had carried them through the impossible mission was dead, its systems shut down forever. But it had done its job. "Scope, you still with me?" "Still here, Blackbird, still here." They sat in the silence, watching the fires burn across the valley. In the distance, they could hear the approach of search and rescue helicopters, their rotors beating against the night sky. "So what happens now?" Scope asked. Kira thought about her psychological evaluation, about the doctor who declared her unfit for combat. She thought about the nightmares that had plagued her for months, about the weight of command that had nearly broken her. "Now we go home," she said quietly, "and we let them try to explain this." The rescue helicopters arrived exactly 20 minutes later, their searchlights cutting through the smoke and debris. As the medical team checked them over, Kira could see the amazement in their eyes. They'd been told to expect casualties, not survivors. "Ma'am," the flight surgeon said, "I need to ask, how are you feeling?" "Tired," Kira replied honestly, "but good, better than I've felt in months." "Any injuries, disorientation, stress reactions?" "Just the usual post-mission fatigue, Doc. Nothing that a hot shower and a cold beer won't fix." The flight surgeon made notes on his clipboard, clearly puzzled. The woman before him didn't match the psychological profile in her file. She was calm, coherent, and completely in control. "We'll need to run a full evaluation back at base," he said. "But preliminarily, you both seem to be in good shape." As they loaded the survivors onto the rescue helicopter, Kira took one last look at the burning valley. The convoy that had threatened to change the balance of power in the region was now nothing but twisted metal and smoke. The missiles that could have brought down passenger jets were buried under tons of rock. "Blackbird," Scope said quietly, "you know they're going to want to know how we did it." "Let them ask," Kira replied. "I'll tell them the truth." "Which is?" "That sometimes the best way to prove you're fit for combat is to go out and win it." The flight back to base was quiet, the rescue crew too amazed to ask questions. They'd seen the footage from the Apache's gun cameras, transmitted automatically to base command. They'd watched one helicopter destroy an entire mechanized convoy against impossible odds. As they approached the base, Kira could see crowds gathered on the flight line. Word had spread quickly through the military community. The grounded pilot who'd been declared unfit for combat had just pulled off the most spectacular single-aircraft victory in recent memory. Blackbird 1, this is Tower. You're cleared for landing on Pad 3, and ma'am, welcome home. The helicopter touched down gently, its skids settling onto the concrete with barely a whisper. As the rotors wound down, Kira could see Colonel Martinez waiting at the edge of the landing pad, his expression unreadable. "Scope," she said quietly, "whatever happens next, I want you to know, it's been an honor flying with you." "The honor's been mine, Blackbird. The honor's been mine." They climbed down from the helicopter together, their legs shaky after the long flight. The crowd pressed forward, but Colonel Martinez held them back with a raised hand. "Lieutenant Colonel Thorne," he said formally, "report." Kira straightened to attention, her flight suit stained with hydraulic fluid and smoke. "Sir, mission complete. Convoy destroyed, missiles neutralized, no friendly casualties." "How?" Martinez asked simply. "Superior firepower, superior tactics, and superior crew, sir." Martinez studied her for a long moment, then broke into a slow smile. "And superior flying, I'm guessing." "Just doing my job, sir." "Your job?" Martinez shook his head. "Thorne, what you did tonight went way beyond your job. What you did tonight was legendary." The crowd erupted in cheers, but Kira barely heard them. She was thinking about the psychological evaluation, about the doctor who declared her unfit for combat. She wondered what he would think of tonight's mission. "Sir," she said quietly, "about my medical status." "What medical status?" Martinez interrupted. "As far as I'm concerned, you're the most fit for combat pilot I've ever seen." "But the evaluation." "The evaluation was wrong, dead wrong, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows it." Over the next hour, Kira found herself at the center of a whirlwind of activity. Intelligence officers wanted to debrief her on the mission. Media relations wanted to interview her about the victory. Fellow pilots wanted to shake her hand and hear the story firsthand. But through it all, one thought kept running through her mind. She was home, not just physically but emotionally. For the first time in months, she felt like herself again. Blackbird's scope appeared at her elbow. "You've got a visitor." Kira looked up to see a woman in dress blues approaching, her rank insignia marking her as a brigadier general. She was younger than Kira had expected, with intelligent eyes and a confident bearing. "Lieutenant Colonel Thorne," the general said, extending her hand. "I'm General Patricia Hayes, Deputy Commander of Air Operations. I've been following your career." "Ma'am," Kira replied, shaking the offered hand. "I want to talk to you about your future," Hayes continued. "But first I want to know, how are you feeling, really feeling?" Kira considered the question carefully. "Honestly, ma'am, better than I've felt in years. The mission tonight, it reminded me why I became a pilot in the first place." "And the psychological evaluation. What about it?" Hayes smiled. "That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Thorne, I'm offering you a new position. Squadron Commander, 4th Attack Helicopter Battalion. It's a promotion, a new start, and a chance to train the next generation of pilots." Kira felt her heart skip a beat. "Ma'am, I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Hayes replied. "The Air Force needs leaders like you, leaders who can pull off the impossible when everything's on the line." "What about my medical status?" "Consider it resolved. As of tomorrow morning, you're cleared for full duty. No restrictions, no limitations, no questions asked." Kira looked around at the crowd of pilots and crew members, all of whom were watching her with respect and admiration. 3 months ago, she'd been a broken pilot with a damaged psyche. Tonight, she was a hero. "Yes, ma'am," she said finally, "I accept." The crowd erupted in cheers again, but this time Kira heard every word. She'd found her way back from the darkness, one mission at a time. As the celebration continued around her, Kira stepped outside for a moment of quiet. The night sky was clear, stars visible despite the base's lights. She thought about the convoy burning in the valley, about the missiles that would never threaten innocent lives. Blackbird's scope joined her in the darkness. Hell of a night. Hell of a night, she agreed. Danny, I want to ask you something. Why did you volunteer to fly with me? After the evaluation, after everyone said I was finished. Scope was quiet for a moment. Because I've flown with a lot of pilots over the years, and I've never seen anyone who cared as much about getting the job done right as you do. The evaluation was just paper, Blackbird. What matters is what's in here. He tapped his chest. And what's in there is solid gold. Kira felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, Danny, for everything. Thank you, Blackbird, for reminding me why we do this job. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the stars. In the distance, they could hear the sound of helicopters taking off for routine patrols. The base was returning to normal, but nothing would ever be quite the same. So what's next? Scope asked. Next, we train a new generation of pilots. We teach them how to fly, how to fight, and how to bring everyone home. All of them. All of them, Kira confirmed. That's the promise I'm making. Every pilot who flies with me, every gunner who trusts me with their life, they all come home. That's a big promise. It's the only promise that matters. The next morning brought a new dawn, both literally and figuratively. Kira woke in her own bed for the first time in months, having slept dreamlessly through the night. The nightmares that had plagued her for so long seemed to have vanished with the burning convoy. She dressed in her flight suit and walked to the hangar where her new squadron was waiting. 24 pilots and gunners, all of them young, all of them eager to learn from the legend who destroyed an entire convoy in a single night. Good morning, she said simply. I'm Lieutenant Colonel Thorne, but you can call me Blackbird. I'm going to be your squadron commander. The pilots and gunners straightened to attention, their eyes bright with excitement and respect. Before we begin, Kira continued, I want to make something clear. What happened last night wasn't about me. It was about training, preparation, and teamwork. It was about refusing to quit when things got tough. And most importantly, it was about remembering that we're not just pilots, we're guardians. She walked among the assembled aircrew, making eye contact with each one. Your job is to protect the innocent, to defend the defenseless, and to bring your teammates home safely. Everything else is secondary. If you can remember that, if you can hold on to that truth when everything else falls apart, then you'll be ready for whatever comes next. A young pilot raised his hand. Ma'am, is it true that you took out 18 vehicles in one night? Kira smiled. It's true, but I didn't do it alone. I had the best gunner in the Air Force watching my back, and I had 23 years of training guiding my hands. Individual heroics don't win wars, teams do. Another pilot spoke up. Ma'am, what about the psychological evaluation? How did you overcome that? The question hung in the air like a challenge. Kira thought about the doctor who declared her unfit for combat, about the months of doubt and darkness that had followed. The evaluation was wrong, she said simply. Sometimes the system makes mistakes. Sometimes the experts get it wrong. What matters isn't what other people think about you, it's what you know about yourself. She looked around at the young faces, seeing her own doubts and fears reflected in their eyes. All of you are going to face moments when you doubt yourselves, when the pressure gets too intense, when the mission seems impossible, when everyone around you says you can't do it. That's when you'll discover who you really are. And if we fail, asked the gunner quietly. Then you get back up and try again, Kira replied. Failure isn't falling down. Failure is staying down. Every pilot in this room is going to make mistakes. You're going to miss targets, misjudge approaches, and second-guess decisions. What separates the good pilots from the great ones is how they respond to those mistakes. She moved to the front of the group, her voice carrying the weight of hard-earned experience. 3 months ago, I was grounded, declared unfit for combat. I had nightmares, panic attacks, and moments when I couldn't even look at a helicopter without feeling sick. The experts said I was finished, that my career was over. The aircrew listened intently, hanging on every word. But last night, when the mission required it, I remembered something important. I remembered that being a pilot isn't about being perfect. It's about being present when your country needs you. It's about finding a way to succeed when everyone else says it's impossible. A young lieutenant raised her hand. "Ma'am, how do we know when we're ready?" "You're never ready," Kira replied honestly. "That's the secret they don't teach you in flight school. You're never completely ready for what comes next, but you prepare anyway. You train anyway. You fly anyway, because someone has to." She walked over to the nearest Apache helicopter, running her hand along its armored hull. "This machine is a weapon, but it's also a tool for protecting the innocent and defending freedom. Every time you climb into that cockpit, you're accepting the responsibility that comes with that power." The aircrew gathered around the helicopter, their faces serious now. "I want each of you to remember this moment," Kira continued. "Remember standing here at the beginning of your careers with everything ahead of you. Remember the dreams you had, the reasons you became pilots. Because someday, when things get dark and the mission seems impossible, you're going to need those memories to guide you home." A crew chief raised his hand. "Ma'am, what's the most important thing you've learned in 23 years of flying?" Kira considered the question carefully. That every mission matters. Every flight could be the one that changes everything. You never know when you're going to be called upon to do something extraordinary. She looked around at the young faces, seeing the next generation of warriors taking shape before her eyes. "Last night I thought my career was over. I thought I was finished, washed up, a has-been who couldn't cut it anymore. But sometimes life gives you a second chance. Sometimes the universe puts you exactly where you need to be when you need to be there." The squadron listened in rapt attention as their new commander continued. "I can't promise you that your careers will be easy. I can't promise that you'll never face moments of doubt or fear. But I can promise you this. If you trust your training, trust your teammates, and trust yourselves, you'll be ready for whatever comes next." She turned back to the helicopter, her reflection visible in its polished surface. "Now let's get to work. We have a lot of training to do, and somewhere out there, someone is counting on us to be ready." The weeks that followed were intense and transformative. Under Kira's leadership, the 4th Attack Helicopter Battalion became one of the most elite units in the Air Force. She pushed her pilots harder than they'd ever been pushed before, but she also supported them through every challenge. The training was realistic, demanding, and sometimes dangerous. Kira believed in preparing her aircrew for the worst-case scenarios they might face in combat. She created exercises that tested their limits, that forced them to think creatively and adapt quickly. "Murphy's Law," she would tell them during briefings. "If something can go wrong, it will go wrong. Your job is to be ready for it." She taught them to fly in adverse weather conditions, to navigate by instruments when visibility was zero, to engage targets while their aircraft was damaged and failing. Most importantly, she taught them to think like warriors, not just pilots. "A technician can fly a helicopter," she would say, "but a warrior can make it dance." The results were remarkable. The battalion's performance scores improved dramatically, and their reputation spread throughout the Air Force. Other units began requesting cross-training opportunities, wanting to learn from the Blackbird Squadron. But Kira's greatest satisfaction came from watching her pilots grow and develop. She saw them gain confidence, overcome their fears, and discover their own inner strength. They were becoming the warriors she knew they could be. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Sarah Chen approached her after a particularly challenging training exercise. "I wanted to thank you for pushing us so hard. 6 months ago, I never would have attempted that night approach in those weather conditions." "And now," Kira asked, Now I know I can handle anything, Chen replied with a smile. Because you taught me that the aircraft doesn't define the pilot defines the aircraft. Kira felt a surge of pride. This was what leadership meant, not just commanding others, but inspiring them to become better than they ever thought possible. One evening, as she was reviewing training reports in her office, Colonel Martinez knocked on her door. "Come in," she called. Martinez entered, carrying a bottle of whiskey and 2 glasses. "I thought you might like to celebrate." "Celebrate what?" "The official word came down today. Your psychological evaluation has been formally rescinded, completely expunged from your record. As far as the Air Force is concerned, it never happened." Kira felt a weight lift from her shoulders. "Thank you, sir. That means more to me than you know." Martinez poured 2 glasses of whiskey and handed one to her. "To the best squadron commander in the Air Force, and to proving that sometimes the experts are wrong." They raised their glasses in a toast. "To second chances," Kira added. "To second chances," Martinez agreed. As they drank, Martinez became more serious. "Kira, I have to ask, how are you really doing? After everything that happened, after the convoy mission, after taking on the squadron, how are you holding up?" Kira considered the question honestly. "Better than I've been in years, sir. The nightmares are gone. The panic attacks have stopped. I feel like myself again. And the pressure, the responsibility of command. It's exactly what I needed," she replied. "Having these young pilots depending on me, knowing that I'm responsible for their development and their safety, it's given me purpose again." Martinez nodded approvingly. "That's what I hoped to hear. You know, when I first heard about the convoy mission, I thought you were crazy, taking on 18 vehicles in a failing aircraft. It seemed like suicide." "It felt like suicide at the time," Kira admitted. "But it also felt necessary. Those missiles couldn't be allowed to escape." "The intelligence report came back last week," Martinez said. "You want to know what you prevented?" "Tell me." "Those missiles were bound for 3 different terrorist cells. Intelligence estimates they could have been used to down at least a dozen commercial aircraft. You probably saved thousands of lives that night." Kira felt a chill run down her spine. She'd known the mission was important, but she hadn't realized the full scope of what was at stake. "Sir, I just did what needed to be done." "No, Kira, you did what heroes do. You put the mission above your own safety, above your own career, above everything else. That's the definition of heroism." They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, sipping their whiskey and reflecting on the path that had led them to this point. "What's next for you?" Martinez asked finally. "More training, more development, more preparing for whatever comes next," Kira replied. "This squadron is going to be the best in the Air Force. I'm going to make sure of it." "I have no doubt you will, but I meant personally. What's next for Kira Thorne?" She thought about the question carefully. "I'm going to keep flying, sir, for as long as they'll let me. This is who I am, what I'm meant to do. The convoy mission reminded me of that." "Good," Martinez said with a smile. "Because the Air Force needs pilots like you, leaders like you, people who can pull off the impossible when everything's on the line." As Martinez left her office, Kira remained at her desk, looking out at the flight line where her squadron's helicopters sat ready for action. Each aircraft represented lives under her command, young pilots and gunners who trusted her to prepare them for whatever challenges lay ahead. She thought about the convoy burning in the valley, about the missiles that would never threaten innocent lives. She thought about the young pilot who'd asked about failure, about the crew chief who'd wanted to know what mattered most. Most of all, she thought about the doctor who declared her unfit for combat. He'd been wrong, but his evaluation had served a purpose. It had forced her to confront her own limitations, to find her way back from the darkness, to rediscover her purpose. "Thank you," she whispered to the empty office, "for being wrong at exactly the right time." 6 months later, Kira stood before another convoy, this one friendly, carrying humanitarian supplies to refugees in a war-torn region. Her squadron was providing escort duty, a routine mission that would have been unremarkable except for one thing. Every pilot under her command was performing flawlessly. "Blackbird 1, this is Talon 2, came the voice of Lieutenant Chen over the radio. "Convoy is secure. No threats detected." "Roger, Talon 2. Maintain formation and stay alert." The mission proceeded without incident, but Kira felt a deep sense of satisfaction watching her pilots work. They moved with confidence and precision, their training evident in every maneuver. "Ma'am," Scope's voice came through her headset. He'd volunteered to fly as her gunner again, despite opportunities for promotion. "Remember when you asked me why I flew with you?" "I remember. I've figured out the real reason. It's not just because you're a good pilot. It's because you make everyone around you better. These kids aren't just learning to fly, they're learning to be warriors." Kira smiled. "They were always warriors, Danny. They just needed someone to show them how." "Maybe, but you're the one who showed them. You're the one who proved that being grounded doesn't mean being finished. You're the one who turned a failing aircraft into a weapon of victory." As the convoy reached its destination and the humanitarian supplies were unloaded, Kira felt a sense of completion. The mission that had begun with a burning convoy in a mountain valley had led to this moment, protecting the innocent, defending the defenseless, bringing hope to those who needed it most. "Blackbird 1, this is Tower," came the voice of ground control. "Mission complete. Return to base." "Roger, Tower. Blackbird Squadron is coming home." The flight back to base was peaceful, the late afternoon sun painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. Kira looked out at her squadron, spread in perfect formation around her, and felt a deep sense of pride. These young pilots had become more than just aircrew, they were family. They trusted her with their lives, and she trusted them with the future of military aviation. Together, they represented something important, the unbreakable bond between warriors, the commitment to excellence that defined the best of the military. "Blackbird 1, you're cleared for landing," came the voice from the tower. "Welcome home." As the helicopters touched down on the flight line, Kira could see crowds gathering to greet them. Word of the squadron's success had spread throughout the base, and everyone wanted to share in the celebration. But Kira's attention was focused on her pilots as they climbed down from their aircraft. Their faces were bright with confidence and accomplishment. They'd completed another successful mission, and they knew they were ready for whatever came next. "Squadron, gather round," she called out as they assembled on the tarmac. "Outstanding work today. Every one of you performed like the professionals you are." The pilots and gunners beamed with pride as their commander continued. "But remember, this was just one mission. Tomorrow brings new challenges, new opportunities to prove yourselves. Stay sharp, stay focused, and never forget why we do this job." "Ma'am," Lieutenant Chen stepped forward. "On behalf of the squadron, I want to say thank you for believing in us, for pushing us, and for showing us what it means to be warriors." "The honor is mine," Kira replied, "all of it." As the crowd dispersed and the pilots headed to debriefing, Kira remained on the flight line for a moment longer. The sun was setting, painting the sky in brilliant colors that reminded her of the fires she'd seen in the valley that night. Blackbird's scope appeared at her side. "Hell of a view." "Hell of a view," she agreed. "Danny, do you ever think about that night, about the convoy?" "Every day," he replied honestly. "But not the way you might think. I don't think about the danger or the fear. I think about the moment when we realized we were going to make it, when we knew we'd done something that mattered." "I think about the missiles," Kira said quietly. "About the lives we saved. About the families who will never have to grieve because of what we did. That's the real victory, isn't it? Not the destroyed vehicles or the medals or the recognition. It's the knowledge that we made a difference." It's the knowledge that we were ready when we were needed, Kira corrected. That's what this job is really about, being ready. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the last light fade from the sky. In the distance, they could hear the sound of helicopters taking off for night patrol, the rhythm of rotors beating against the darkness. "So what's next?" Scope asked. "More training, more missions, more preparing for whatever comes next," Kira replied. "This squadron is going to be the best in the Air Force. I'm going to make sure of it. And after that? After that, we train the next generation. We pass on what we've learned, and we make sure they're ready for their own impossible missions." "Think they'll be ready?" Kira looked back at the hangar where her pilots were conducting their post-flight briefing. Through the windows, she could see them discussing the day's mission, sharing insights and learning from each other. "They're already ready," she said with a smile. "They just don't know it yet." As they walked back toward the hangar, Kira reflected on the journey that had brought her to this point. From the grounded pilot declared unfit for combat to the squadron commander training the next generation of warriors, it had been a long and difficult road. But every step had been worth it. Every challenge had made her stronger, every setback had taught her something valuable, every victory had prepared her for the next battle. "Blackbird," Scope said as they reached the hangar door, "I want you to know something. That night when you asked me to fly with you, I wasn't just volunteering to be your gunner. I was volunteering to be part of something bigger than myself." "What do you mean?" "I mean that what we did that night, what we're doing now with this squadron, it's not just about flying helicopters or completing missions. It's about proving that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they have to." Kira felt tears prick her eyes. "Thank you, Danny, for everything. Thank you, Blackbird, for reminding me why we serve." They entered the hangar together, where the debriefing was in full swing. The pilots were animated, discussing tactics and techniques, sharing stories and insights. It was the sound of warriors hunting their craft, preparing for the battles yet to come. "Ma'am," Lieutenant Chen approached them, "the squadron is ready for tomorrow's training exercise. We've reviewed the mission parameters and we're confident we can handle whatever you throw at us." "Good," Kira replied, "because tomorrow we're going to simulate a convoy escort mission. Multiple threats, adverse weather conditions, and equipment failures. I want to see how you handle the pressure." "Understood, ma'am. We'll be ready." As the briefing concluded and the pilots headed to their quarters, Kira remained in the hangar with Scope. The Apache helicopters sat silent and ready, their weapons systems loaded, their fuel tanks full. "They remind me of us," Scope observed, looking at the aircraft. "Ready for anything but hopping for peace." "Peace is what we fight for," Kira replied, "but we prepare for war. And if war comes, then we'll be ready, all of us. Every pilot, every gunner, every crew member in this squadron will be ready because we've trained for it, prepared for it, and committed ourselves to it." She walked over to the nearest Apache, running her hand along its armored hull, just as she had done months earlier with her first squadron. "This machine is a weapon, but it's also a tool for protecting the innocent and defending freedom. Every time we climb into that cockpit, we're accepting the responsibility that comes with that power. And the responsibility that comes with command. That's the heaviest burden of all," Kira admitted. "Knowing that every decision I make, every training exercise I design, every mission I plan could mean the difference between life and death for these young pilots." "But you're ready for it." "I'm ready for it," she confirmed. "Because I've been where they are. I've faced the doubt, the fear, the moments when everything seems impossible, and I've found my way through it." "How?" "By remembering that being a pilot isn't about being perfect. It's about being present when your country needs you. It's about finding a way to succeed when everyone else says it's impossible." They stood in the quiet hangar, surrounded by the machines that had become extensions of their own bodies. Each helicopter represented countless hours of training, preparation, and commitment. Each one was a testament to the dedication of the men and women who flew them. Blackbird, Scope said quietly, I want you to know something. That night in the valley when we were fighting for our lives, I never doubted we would make it home. Not once. Why not? Because I was flying with you. And I knew that no matter what happened, you would find a way to complete the mission and bring us home. I was terrified, Kira admitted. Every second of that fight I was terrified, but I was also determined. Determined to prove that the evaluation was wrong, that I wasn't finished, that I could still make a difference. And you did. You made all the difference in the world. As they prepared to leave the hangar, Kira took one last look at the squadron's aircraft. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new opportunities to test her pilot's skills and prepare them for whatever lay ahead. But tonight, she was content in the knowledge that she had found her way back from the darkness. She had proven that being grounded didn't mean being finished. She had shown that sometimes the best way to overcome doubt is to face it head-on. Scope, she said as they walked toward the exit, do you ever regret it, volunteering to fly with me that night? Never, he replied without hesitation. That night changed everything. It reminded me why I became a gunner, why I serve, why I fight. It reminded me that we're not just soldiers, we're guardians. Guardians of what? Of hope, of freedom, of the belief that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they have to. They stepped out into the night air, the stars bright overhead. In the distance, they could hear the sound of helicopters returning from patrol, their missions complete, their crews safe. Tomorrow's another day, Scope observed. Tomorrow's another opportunity, Kira corrected. Another chance to prove ourselves, to grow stronger, to prepare for whatever comes next. And if the impossible happens again, then we'll be ready for it, because that's what we do, that's who we are. As they walked across the darkened base, Kira felt a deep sense of satisfaction. She had found her way back from the edge, had proven that being declared unfit for combat didn't mean the end of her story. She had built a squadron of warriors, trained a new generation of pilots, and prepared them for the challenges that lay ahead. The convoy that had burned in the valley had been just the beginning. The real victory was what came after, the training, the preparation, the commitment to excellence that defined her squadron. Blackbird, Scope said as they reached the barracks, I want you to know something. Whatever happens next, whatever challenges we face, I'm proud to serve with you. The honor is mine, Danny, all of it. No, he replied with a smile. The honor is ours, all of ours. Every pilot, every gunner, every crew member who's learned what it means to be a warrior. You didn't just save a convoy that night. You saved all of us. As they parted ways for the evening, Kira looked up at the stars one more time. Somewhere out there, threats were gathering, challenges were forming, missions were waiting to be flown. But she was ready for them. Her squadron was ready for them. The woman who had been declared unfit for combat had become the leader of the most elite helicopter unit in the Air Force. The pilot who had been grounded had learned to soar higher than ever before. The warrior who had faced her demons had emerged stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she was content in the knowledge that she had found her way home, not just to the base, not just to the squadron, but to herself. The last part of her journey was just beginning, and she was ready for whatever came next. Years later, when military historians wrote about the evolution of helicopter warfare, they would mark the convoy mission as a turning point, not just because of the tactical victory, but because of what it represented: the triumph of skill over circumstance, of determination over doubt, of the human spirit over seemingly impossible odds. But for Kira Blackbird Thorne, the real legacy wasn't in the history books. It was in the faces of the young pilots who had learned to fly under her command, in the missions they would complete, in the lives they would save. The woman who had been marked unfit for combat had become the mother of a new generation of warriors. And that, more than any medal or commendation, was a victory worth celebrating. The sky was waiting, and she was ready to meet it.